The 185th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been, there ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Down off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Vinny.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You've got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh Anthony back with you to look ahead to Wednesday's night game against the Marquette Golden Eagles, which will be in the Smith Center at 7 o'clock on ESPN2. Buddy, before we look ahead and preview this game against Marquette, Saturday night was a lot of fun. That's the best we've felt about this team after a game, probably outside of the Duke game all year long. And maybe if the Duke game didn't have the emotions to go into that game, this was the best this team has played by far this season. And it feels like this team is starting to turn the corner as we head to the final stretch. Only 2 weeks left in the regular season, and a lot of good things going in Carolina's direction, or Carolina's way right now. After their win over Saturday, their net ranking improved by 20 points. They basically swapped places with Louisville. That's really big for their NCAA tournament resume and really their margin for error, as we mentioned in the recap. Now that loss allows them to have another loss or two that, not saying that we want them to lose, but they now have margin for error where if they lost on Saturday, they wouldn't have had such a margin for error. And also, because of some other events that transpired over the weekend, Duke beating Virginia, Syracuse coming back to beat Notre Dame. As of right now, if Carolina plays some of their ACC games that are still scheduled to play, Florida State, Syracuse, and Duke, those are all chances for Carolina to add quad 1 wins to the tournament resume and really boost their resume and move up the seed lines for the eventual NCAA tournament. Another piece of news that came out of today from the program was Kerwin Walton was named the ACC Freshman of the Week. He's now the 4th Tar Heel to do that this season, which is the first time in the history of Carolina basketball 4 freshmen have been able to win the award. Only the second program in ACC history, joining Wake Forest back from 1978, 1979 to do such a thing. And we've had a lot of conversations this year about Carolina's inexperience in their backcourt, but all 3 freshman guards, Caleb Love, R.J. Davis, and now Kerwin Walton, have won the award to go along with Day'Ron Sharpe, the big man up front, as Tar Heels to receive the ACC Freshman of the Week. Be interesting to see how he builds off of that performance, as it's been pretty much well known in post-game press conferences. Teams are now starting to try to take him away. They're running him off the three-point line a lot better, so it's been really good to see him put the ball on the floor, get to the basket, and then utilize a mid-range game, which is usually dead in today's basketball, but Kerwin Walton has still proven that it's still an effective shot for him and for Carolina. So now let's look ahead to the Wednesday's game against Marquette. We talked to you last time that this isn't a really good team. They come in 10-12 overall, 4-5 on the road, 6-10 in the Big East. But interestingly enough, in terms of net ranking and all that stuff, this is a better matchup for Carolina than Boston College because the Eagles haven't had a good season up there in Chestnut Hill. They just fired their head coach Jim Christian a little over a week ago as a result of them having such a down season. So a lot like last week with Northeastern, not a good team, but a chance for Carolina to get on the court and, more importantly, get another win and get better.
Well, it's a better team than Northeastern. Let's make that known.
Are they, though?
I think so. Mainly because of the conference that they play in. Look, the Big East is not what the Big East used to be. We're not trying to say that by any stretch of the imagination. There are two really, really bad teams in the Big East. That's DePaul and that's Butler this year. Normally, and even Butler usually plays a lot of their teams tough. That's the thing about the Big East, though, and that's the thing about Marquette. They have lost a lot of games this year. They're nowhere near the team they were a couple years ago when Marcus Howard was still there, when you had both the Hauser twins, where they were a team that some people thought could make a surprisingly deep run as a Cinderella in the NCAA tournament. This team's not that team anymore. They're below 500, but every game that they've played close. So I'm not saying that Carolina should get beat in this game. I'm not saying it should even be close. But if Carolina is not careful, this is a team that has the capability of playing you tight because they've been doing it all year in the Big East. From Carolina's perspective, yeah, you want to see your guys continue to grow, your freshmen continue to grow. By the way, wanted to take a shot. Take that, Coach K. Four freshmen receiving Freshman of the Week. Never achieved that even with your one and done, so you can take that and shove it.
He did get ACC Quitter of the Year, though, in Jalen Johnson.
Son, you know what? I don't even want to get into that. I hate it. That team's better without him, man. I hate it. But yeah, I mean, I think that especially with them switching places with Marquette, got to mix up with Louisville. You're now 33rd in the net ranking. You're probably on the 9 line here. This one isn't going to help you that much, but what it does is it allows you to stay in rhythm for a game at Florida State where if you win, let's say you win that game and you win out. Where do you think this team is seed-wise at the end of the regular season if they win the remaining 4 games on their schedule? I'd say 6. I'd say that probably 5 or 6, depending on where Florida State probably ends up.
It depends because the ACC tournament is going to be a really big deal for this team in terms of their seeding.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So if they win out, you would imagine they're going to go pretty deep in the ACC tournament. I think the highest they can get to is a 4.
Right. But that's why this game is big, because if you want that to even be a possibility, you had to play this game. You don't play this game, you're taking a week off in between games, and then you're bringing in the team that right now I think is playing the best basketball in the ACC. Like Virginia, we thought they were playing the best basketball a couple of weeks ago. That team, got destroyed by Florida State and lost to Duke, which, I mean, look, Duke's, I think, feeling themselves a little bit right now. That's a game that if Virginia is going to be a legitimate national title contender, they should have won. So Florida State feels like the toughest team in the ACC right now. If you can come out, perform well in this game, and bring some confidence with you into that game, I think that's probably the best recipe for anybody on that remaining schedule that Florida State has to win that game. But at the same time, I mean, look, we do have to be a little cautiously, take the game that we saw the other day with a little bit of a grain of salt, because you just don't know if you're going to see that performance. We've seen that happen before, and Carolina's come out, struggled the next couple of games. I don't think that's what this is, but at the same time, you're dealing with a young group. How can they maintain what they did against Louisville to a certain extent going forward? I think this is the perfect recipe, though, in this game against Marquette.
I think the good thing going for them was the first thing Roy Williams did after the win on Saturday night was he pretty much played it down. They hadn't played in 3 weeks. They haven't practiced. We caught them on a bad night. That's a typical Roy Williams saying after they kick someone's butt like they did the other night. But you look at that game, and you can't deny what Carolina did and take that away from the fact that Louisville hasn't played in 3 weeks. Did it factor in?
Right.
Absolutely. But the thing I took away from that game and thing I'll be looking forward in this game, we can talk about Carolina's offense all day long, and I'll love talking about them running the floor, scoring 99 points, shooting 60% from the field, hitting 8 3-pointers, all that stuff. That team defended, and they had fun playing defense. And you and I were watching the game together on Saturday night, and the one thing I always say it starts on the defensive end of the court. If they buy in and play defense.
He said that like 4 times during the game.
If they buy in and play defense, they can play at a really high level, despite the fact that they're young, despite the fact that you got one guy that you trust to shoot the three-point shot consistently. If they buy in and play defense, this can be a really good team and a really dangerous team come March. That team the other night, they bought in defensively, and you could see guys on the bench getting into it. You could see the guys on the court getting into it, and that's contagious. That's infectious. So that's what I'll be looking forward to seeing in this game. Does Carolina come out with that same mindset on the defensive end of the court? If they want to get down in the stance and guard somebody, if they want to close down a three-point shot, you gave up one made three-pointer the other night. Look at the result. You won a game by 45. Like, those things, you can build off of that.
Right.
Because, you know, even though they hadn't played in 3 weeks, you still did a lot of things well that you haven't done all year long. Like, you know, you forced turnovers. You got on the fast break. You guarded the three-point line well. If that carries over, their confidence is going to go through the roof. And, you know, we've said all year long, and I've meant it, this was going to be a team that gradually got better as the season got older. That was happening up until you had back-to-back weeks with COVID pauses where this team just frankly wasn't on the court. This team has progressed a lot more from the team we lost, the team we saw lose at NC State, to the team we saw lose at Georgia Tech, even the team that we saw beat Syracuse. This team has gotten better
For sure.
from week to week, game to game even. Even look at that Virginia game. They lost, but they got really, really good looks. We haven't said that the last couple of times we've lost to Virginia. Normally, they took away our offense. In that game, Carolina just couldn't make layups.
And they've learned from that the last couple of games. I think that was the part that frustrated us the most last year, was that we could see at home what was the problem, but they would never make the adjustments to be able to win those games. This team is much different.
I think I've been very critical of my man Roy Williams on the sideline this year.
I'm getting concerned that we're going to be changing the name of the podcast.
You know, sometimes we look over there and he's just kind of standing there. But I feel like, in a certain way, even though they're really, really young, he trusts this team more than he trusted last year's team. And last year we were banking on that experience that was returning and what transferred in to kind of carry them through the season. This team doesn't have experience. They got 7 freshmen in their rotation. We've heard that all year long. But the way he's coaching them allows you to think that he trusts them a lot more than I mean, I know I do, because my trust level with them isn't very high, but he trusts them, and that's all that matters. As long as he's trusting what they're doing on the court, he'll do what he's doing, and he's allowing his team to grow through the wins and through the losses. I think it's paying off this season. But it's really going to pay off next year, and it's going to pay off in 2 years, because most of these dudes are still going to be here, and you're going to have a very experienced team that's got a lot of talent that's going to be a favorite to win the national championship. But that's down the road. This year, you're seeing this team. It's a very coachable team. Last year's team wasn't very coachable. They were a bunch of, idiots. This year's team takes what they're saying to heart, and they're playing better.
I think they just didn't have a lot of guys that fit the system well. Like, I don't think we knew coming in Cole Anthony didn't, but he was a take because of how talented he was. I think they thought Christian Keeling fit the system, didn't really fit it. And with Justin Pierce, did that not feel kind of like he was out on the transfer market? You felt like there was another spot open, and really just from the national mindset of your team, they kind of put pressure on themselves to bring him in and sort of make him fit. That's kind of how that felt. This year, it feels like a lot of the guys that are there just fit a lot better, which I think is evidenced by the fact that you had a guy that came in by recruiting rankings, should not be playing any role, should be sitting on the bench, should be taking his redshirt year and maybe contributing later in his career. He's your best three-point shooter. He's your best perimeter shooter. I think that's what it's showing about this team as opposed to last year's team. There's guys that fit this team a little bit better. And I mean, you're even seeing it with guys that performed well last year, mainly Garrison Brooks. There are guys that fit this team a little bit better and have more talent that are overtaking him in the lineup. And I think last year we wouldn't have even thought that was imaginable. We didn't think anybody was near the talent that Garrison Brooks was last year, because remember, there was a point last year where we were talking Brandon Robinson was a starter, and we said it on this podcast. B-Rob was over his head.
Yeah.
Is there a guy right now on this roster that you feel like is over his head in the role that he's playing? I don't think there's one. I think most of the guys right now that are on the roster can handle the role that they're in. Not like last year.
I mean, I think in an ideal world, Leaky Black's coming off the bench, but he has proven to be a valuable part of this team being a starting lineup.